News we haven't gotten to yet in our hour. 1.2 million more people jobless, officially filing for unemployment today. Those are the new numbers. The scenes that we're seeing around the country are, for many, becoming a new normal. People waiting up to 8 hours in Kentucky trying to file for their unemployment insurance benefits in person. The images are one of the backdrops, one of the pieces of context for an upcoming march on Washington this Saturday. It is led by Bishop William Barber, calling attention not only the many racial injustices that have dominated the national conversation recently, but the economic component as well. It comes on the same day that Donald Trump is holding a MAGA rally in Tulsa. We have more on that later this hour, but now we turn to Bishop Barber, president of the Repairers of the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. We should mention his new book, We Are Called to Be a Movement, comes out next week. Thank you, sir. Tell us what you're doing, what it stands for, and why this march is different.
Well, along with Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris, the co-chair, and now 45 coordinating committees in 45 different states and 150 partners and religious bodies and actors and activists and many people coming together. You know, this is on Saturday, the Poor People's Assembly, a mass Poor People's Assembly moral march on Washington. We've been organized for more than 3 years, and we've been bringing people together across all racial lines, every race, creed, and color, to deal with systemic racism, systemic poverty, 140 million people living in poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. And what you'll see Saturday is a cementing of that. We had to go digital. It's digital, but people will be able to join from every place, and it is a counterintuitive movement, Ari. It's about white coal miners in Kentucky deciding to work with black folk from the Delta. It's about people from California working with people in Carolinas. It's about the Apache Nation joining in with people from Maine who are saying, look, all 5 of these issues are killing us. And so while Trump will be trafficking in death in Oklahoma, we'll be talking about life. He's going out to disturb division. We're organizing the 1.4 million poor people in Oklahoma. We're concerned about the 500,000 people in Oklahoma in the midst of a pandemic that aren't insured. And we're saying that people have to come together in counterintuitive ways, because what we really need are in this moment is a third reconstruction of our society.
Bishop, it's interesting hearing you draw that direct contrast to the trade-offs in the other rally. We're looking at the coronavirus death toll and the risk that faces poor and minorities. And we'll put this back up. You see Black and Hispanic, Latino Americans, coronavirus mortality rates are now found to be as much as 10 times higher than white Americans. That is, and this is, of course, getting the information and the science as we go. It's pretty new. That is even worse than what scientists were releasing just a month or two ago. Where does that fit into the contrast you draw that while there are people who say protesting in the streets, which is something you've supported, of course, and led, is necessary right now, you contrast this weekend, yours being virtual, to Donald Trump gathering people together?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're using all these tools, but one of the things you look at that, let's also add the First Nation indigenous people, because the second highest rate per capita is the Navajo people. All of the stats you just saw are choices. Those are not happening because people are black or because they're brown or because they're first indigenous. It's happening because of historic denial of health care. It's happening because the people that are dying the most are the ones that are having to go to work because they don't have the sufficient unemployment and the sick leave or the living wages. They don't have the forgiveness of their rent. They don't have the moratoriums against cutting off their water. So they're being forced into lethal situations. And one of the things, Ari, we're saying is in this moment, while we focus on the death of George Floyd, part of what we have to also do in this moment, and others who have died, that's just one piece of violence that's caused by racism. We need to also look at all the people who aren't caught on camera, all the people that die because of poverty, all the people that die because of lack of health care. And this pandemic is exposing the wounds of our society that come from the breakages, the wounds that come from racism, systemic racism, and poverty. But we also must connect it, because while black people and brown people may be dying disproportionate, Let my white brothers and sisters who are poor and otherwise understand that doesn't mean it's only black and white people dying. The fact of the matter is this coronavirus is killing, but it's killing not because the virus is so powerful. The virus is made more powerful by negligence, the negligence of the Trump administration and the negligence of our Congress that passed 3 bills, and 84% of that money went to corporations, 3 bills. And we did not guarantee people health care and guarantee sick leave and guarantee unemployment in the midst of a pandemic. And that is why our movement, the Mass Poor People's Assembly March on Washington, is bringing people together to say we've got to have what I call a decision, Ari. Are we going to continue to allow policies that create death to live, or are we going to create policies that bring life? For instance, if we just raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, 49 million people would move up out of poverty and low wealth, and it would pump $328 billion into the economy to cause it to live. If we took one military contract, just one, from Boeing or somebody, $25 billion, we could pay for every state that denied Medicaid expansion. Every state. We've got to decide, I think we're in a day, lastly, that the issue is not left or right. The issue is not conservative versus liberal. We have to look at the DM of every piece of policy. What is the death measurement? Because the state is not supposed to kill life, liberty, in the pursuit of happiness. So if a health care policy or the denial of health care produces death, it has no place in our society. If blocking living wages produces death because people die from poverty, and these things can be measured, then it has no place. It's time that we look at what is causing death and what is causing life and choose life. That's what this campaign is about. And it's about all of us deciding we're not going to just die and go away. 700 people die every day from poverty, 250,000 people a year, but they're saying we're not doing that anymore. We're not being quiet anymore. It's gone on too long. And lastly, the Declaration of Independence says this: after a long train of abuses, it is the responsibility, the obligation of the people to alter the government. Where there's been a long train of abuses when it comes to racism, and a long train of abuses when it comes to poverty, and black and white and brown and red and yellow and gay and straight and trans and people who are Jewish, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, people of faith, people not of faith, have decided we're going to build this Mass Poor People's Assembly, and we're going to shift the narrative, and we're going to build voting power, because the number of poor and low wealth people who did not vote and do not vote far outweigh any margin of victory. And I say to the Democrats and to the Republicans, however, we have got to stop these kind of political debates that never talk about the poor. They talk about the middle class and the wealthy. We need to talk to the millions, the 140 million people in this country, poor and low wealth. What are you going to do for them?
Bishop Barber, we've had you on before. You always go deep, but connecting all these dots and really pushing us to think about the moral center of this. I appreciate you, sir. And I'll mention again, for those interested in hearing more, a lot of work going on. You can see it here, June2020.org. Saturday's Moral March on Washington, a virtual event. We got to fit in a break, but when we come back, the lawyers suing over that very Trump Tulsa rally we just discussed and why they're going to court calling it a, quote, biological bomb when we come back.